Hello, my name is Tony. Sometimes, considering the films I like and enjoy, I'm struck by how commercially unsuccessful most of them were. Not just that, how unpopular they were with audiences and critics at the time in which they were made and released. And sometimes I wonder, is it just me? Are my tastes largely obtuse? Is it a flaw in my personality? Yeah, another one I mean. And then I think of the Yakuza, director Sidney Pollack's 1974 transcultural crime thriller, which was a flat-out box office disaster. How, despite its flaws, it is a truly essential movie, objectively a masterpiece of genre cinema to rival anything by the two Sams, Peckinpah and Fuller that is. Which is both reassuring and validating of my personal egocentricity, you know, the psychological self-preservation mechanism that insists I'm right and they're wrong, so fuck them and their dog. Yes, the Yakuza, Tony's one-way ticket to existential self-justification. Can't beat it, pilgrims. Screenwriter Paul Schrader, he of Taxi Driver, got a letter from his brother Leonard, who was living in Japan. Leonard had spent a lot of time hanging out in Yakuza bars and watching Yakuza-flavoured Japanese movies from the toy company. He became fascinated by the notions and rituals surrounding honour, transgression, debt and obligation. In his letter he suggested a story for a screenplay. Initially Robert Aldrich was set to direct and Lee Marvin slated to star. Marvin dropped out when he felt he wasn't getting paid enough, and Robert Mitchum came on board. Aldrich got dumped when, for whatever reason, Mitchum didn't want to work with him. Sidney Pollack replaced Aldrich, but had issues with Schrader's screenplay, so he drafted in Robert Towne, renowned scribe of Polanski's Chinatown, to rewrite it. Schrader felt his original work was about a hardcore, violent underworld fixated on blood, duty, honour, sacrifice and obligation. Pollack and Towne went for a more multicultural romanticism that softened Mitchum's character to be less abrasive and more sympathetic. Schrader also felt that if Robert Redford, who was in the frame for a while, had been cast instead of Mitchum, the film would have made serious money. Considering Redford's profile at the time, he's probably not wrong. However, I think what we got is one of the most riveting, powerful and non-xenophobic transcultural neo-noir thrillers Hollywood ever produced. Considering the action within is pretty much hard-boiled enough and suffused with a haunting kinetic energy that keeps the viewer on edge without being overly graphic, I'd say that Pollack and Towne got the balance just about right. There was no reason to imagine it would lack commercial impact. That the critics and the public didn't agree doesn't necessarily mean they were right, but it's nigh on impossible to make people like and want what they don't like and want. I'm feeling this very acutely right now myself, let me tell you, and that situation is more than fair enough in the arts and elsewhere. I support it, and it must be accepted. The right to like what you like and dislike what you don't. All I can do is try and explain why I think it's so good, and see if maybe you want to give it a chance if you haven't already. So the plotline and some character backfill. Harry Kilmer, Robert Mitchum and George Tanner, Brian Keith, were US military cops in Japan during the occupation following World War II. Harry developed a deep interest in and passion for Japanese culture and society. During his posting, Harry became involved with single-parent Aiko Tanaka, Keiko Kishi, who had to resort to black marketeering in order to secure antibiotics for his sick daughter, Hanako, Christina Kakubo. Harry intervened and saved the lives of both mother and daughter when they were threatened by gangsters. He began a romantic relationship with Aiko, but despite asking her repeatedly, she refused to marry him. Aiko's brother, Ken Takakura, returned to Japan from the Philippines, where he'd been presumed dead. He'd in fact been labouring under the misapprehension that the war had not ended and had continued serving as an Imperial Japanese soldier. Upon his return, learning of the situation with Aiko and Harry, he is torn between his anguish at his sister sleeping with the enemy, so to speak, and having the burden of a debt to Harry that he can never repay, the saving of Aiko and Hanako's lives. He refuses to talk to Aiko again and joins the Yakuza clan as a foot soldier. When Harry's military service comes to an end and with Aiko refusing to marry him or leave Japan, he borrows money from Tanner and sets her up in a coffee shop and bar, which she names Kilmer House. Harry leaves Japan and never returns. Until, that is, in the present day, 73 or 74, Tanner, now a shady importer-exporter, has reneged on an arms deal with Yakuza boss Tono, e.g. Okada, and in retaliation Tono has kidnapped Tanner's daughter, holding her hostage. Knowing of Ken's jiri owed to Kilmer, jiri being a debt that can traditionally never be repaid, he approaches his old friend and begs him to travel to Japan and secure Ken's help in arranging the safe return of his daughter. Tanner sends a along his personal bodyguard Dusty, Richard Jordan, as backup. Once in Japan, Kilmer and Dusty stay with Kilmer's old army buddy Oliver Wheat, Herb Edelman. Wheat stayed on in Tokyo after the occupation, such was his admiration for and love of Japanese culture, and there he's made a life for himself. Kilmer meets with Aiko at her bar, and immediately old feelings resurface. Hanako is pleased to see him. Aiko tells Harry that Ken is no longer Yakuza, but runs a kendo school in Kyoto. When Harry turns up, Ken is less than happy to make his reacquaintance, but acknowledging his debt, agrees to use his old Yakuza contacts to locate Tanner's daughter. Once they know where the girl is being held, Harry, Ken and Dusty bust in and free the hostage. Ken takes up the sword again and some of Tono's men are killed. As Ken has been seen and recognized, his life is now in danger. With his daughter safely out of the country and on a flight back to the States, Tanner arranges a meeting with Tono. Despite Tanner's betrayal over the gun shipment, it soon becomes apparent that the two men were also working on a plan to usurp Ken's brother Goro, Jim Shigeta. Who is Goro? He is the legal counsel for all the Yakuza clans, and his policy is one of maintaining peace so that business can flourish. Tono wants to take his place, and peace is something that isn't on his agenda. Tanner throws both Kilmer and Ken under the bus when Tono puts out a contract on their lives. He knows if Goro intervenes on Ken's behalf, his days as chief Yakuza advisor will be over. Goro knows this too, and advises Kilmer that either Ken kills Tono in the traditional manner as honor demands with a sword, or Kilmer, who, as an unusual gaijin who understands and respects Japanese values, kills him by any other means. He reinforces that Kilmer now owes a debt to Ken. From here on in, there is tragedy, violence and death, leading to a shattering reveal exposing the truth about the relationship between Harry, Aiko and Ken, and an outcome that results in Harry never being able to extend his pinky finger while sipping tea at the Ritz ever again. Shot mostly on location in Tokyo and Kyoto, the cinematography by Okazaki Kozo is slick, stylish and sumptuous to look upon. It's blindingly gorgeous and as sharp as a relentlessly tempered katana blade. The score by Dave Grusin is almost equally as accomplished, a smart fusion of Western and Eastern influences, melodies and motifs that fits the on-screen action to near perfection. This is one good-looking, orally pleasing film. Pollock's direction is sure-footed, blending a tortured romanticism with dark malevolent action, all flashing blades and cacophonous gunplay. He draws some wonderful performances from the actors. Do I overuse the term neo-noir these days? Very probably, but I could easily see the Yakuza shot in black and white and made in the early 50s and being hailed as a genre classic. Talking of the actors, no one captures and projects jaded, crumpled, world-weary macho chic quite as definitively as Robert Mitchum. This was his last great screen role as a leading man, and he fits it, or it fits him, like a velvet-coated nitrile glove. Had it been his last film, he would have left the soundstage on a career high point. He's nothing short of phenomenal. The supporting cast is a classy roster, excellent showings by Brian Keith, Richard Jordan and Herb Edelman. However, I'll never forgive Keith for those eye-raping trousers. Dear God, man! But it's the Japanese actors who really shine. Ken Takakura is an absolute powerhouse of pensive stoicism and precision-tooled physical violence. A major star in Japan who by the mid-70s had made over 180 domestic films. In an ideal world, the Yakuza would have propelled him to worldwide status. Sadly, it was not to be. He would turn up again in Ridley Scott's Black Rain in 1989, but the global superstardom he so richly deserved would go unrealised. Added to this is an achingly sensitive depiction of fragile vulnerability and gentle sadness from Keiko Kishi as Aiko, along with the sheer professionalism of James Shigeta and Eiji Okada as polar opposite Yakuza heavy hitters. The acting and characterisation is hard to fault across the board. Action junkies are well served by some memorable slice and dice set pieces peppered with bursts of ferocious gunplay. The assault on Wheat's domicile by Tono's foot soldiers, which sees Dusty impaled on a katana blade and Aiko's gorgeous daughter Hanako killed by a stray bullet, is as exhilarating as it is emotionally traumatizing. There is a beautifully shot bathhouse scene wherein a Yakuza assassin swims underwater to drive a knife into Harry whilst he talks with Dusty. It's electrifyingly vibrant and tense, the killer like a tattooed shark closing in on its prey. It ends in the inevitable blood and death, but luckily not for Harry. Harry's retaliation against Tanner, who he knows was a party to the attempt on his life, is a fearsome shootout. Harry visits Tanner's Tokyo apartment and with ruthless and savage determination kills all his bodyguards and pumps his duplicitous buddy full of bullets. Revenge served cold. And I honestly feel it's impossible to oversell the final extended confrontation between Kilmer, Ken and Tono and his men. The two attack Tono's lair, Ken with his katana and Kilmer with an automatic pistol in one hand and a double-barrel shotgun in the other. If it had utilised slow-motion camera work, you would immediately think Peckinpah. As it is, it slaps us with a grueling, exciting, suspenseful and dynamic slice-and-dice shoot-'em-up hybrid that's as good as anything seen in action cinema anywhere. Fucking lovely stuff. One of the special things about the Yakuza, from my perspective, is the cultural sensitivity it promotes. Compared with the aforementioned Black Rain, it is a monument of tolerance. The Western characters are mostly seduced by Japanese culture, and the Japanese characters are not represented as stereotypical villains or submissive heathens with strange inscrutable ways. There is an effort made to achieve understanding, even by the callow and ill-informed Dusty, who, attracted to Hanako, wants to know more about her world, her country, her life. The Yakuza members are not your standard evil oriental cartoon caricatures. Sure, they're gangsters and killers, criminals, but they have a meaningful code, are driven by honour and duty. If they transgress, the token of atonement they are bound to provide is via the ritual of Yubitsumi, the amputation of the little finger as a ceremonial apology. Rather than demonize this as a barbaric and uncivilized act, the Yakuza go deeper, framing it as a true and sincere sacrifice, an emblem of honest regret and an honourable method of seeking forgiveness for one's transgressions against another. During the climactic showdown with Tono's men, Ken kills Goro's wayward son in self-defense. Ken wants to commit seppuku, ritual suicide, to atone to his brother. Goro refuses, so Ken resorts to Yubitsumi instead. When Kilmer learns that Ken is not in fact Aiko's brother but her husband, and Hanako was Ken's daughter, he realises the pain and anguish he has inadvertently visited upon all. In what Quentin Tarantino calls one of the great endings of any movie of its era, and arguably Mitchum's single greatest acting moment on film, Harry severs his finger and offers it to Ken by way of apology. Mitchum and Ken Takakura are so emotionally invested in this scene, you'll forget you're watching a movie. Yep, it's that good. Black Rain, made in supposedly more informed times, is a thick-eared and, well, more inherently racist proposition by comparison. Any understanding or respect the Michael Douglas character may have achieved by the end feels arbitrarily superficial and tokenistic. Sort of, well, you Japs ain't all bad after all, I suppose. In the Yakuza, it's far more sincerely and respectfully integrated. It feels organic and humanistic. It's one of the film's major strengths, that healthy, non-judgmental regard with a refreshing shot of cultural integrity, rare for films of this type. It's not perfect by any means, but it tries, and tries harder than most. The Yakuza is a remarkable standout thriller with heart, soul and conscience. It steers well clear of being a live-action cartoon or superciliously sneering with superior Western arrogance at those dumb jerk foreigners. That it failed to find an audience is a great shame, but at least over time it has attracted positive reappraisal, increased admiration and achieved a popular cult status. If you haven't seen it and you want to experience a gripping action movie with some thought and intelligence driving it, it may well be your cup of sake. Thank you for your time and attention. If you wish to do so, hit like, didn't like, leave a comment or subscribe. If you don't want to do any of those things, I will accept a severed pinky in atonement for your regrettable sloth and disinterest. Meanwhile, I myself shall fade majestically into that slowly setting red sun. Sayonara, pilgrims.